So I want to thank you for inviting me to the event, and particularly also because I'm always been impressed by what is done here in Cordoba regarding teacher education, regarding school. And maybe I should start by saying that my title, or the title of my presentation, that I would like to change it to the right to school. The right to school. I think as a society, and in a way, so what I will say will cross a lot of the things that Ines has already just mentioned. I will do it a little bit in a different way or from a different perspective, but it will cross many of this idea. But so the question of the right to school. So it means immediately that it is a public issue. Yes. The right to school. Do we, as a society, confirm that the new generation has the right to school? Yes. And so allow me also to refer briefly to this publication, In Defense of the School, that maybe some of you will know. This book that received a lot of attention also, particularly in Latin America, and for which we have to thank Jorge and Ines. They played an important role in making the book also translated and discussed in South America. With our book, published in 2013 in Spanish, we explicitly wanted to defend the school against all kinds of critiques, that it was reproducing inequality, that it was boring, that it was an outdated, inefficient form of learning, that it copied the industrial factory. A critique which is even today repeated by somebody like Stefan Ball. But the situation has changed. So, on the one hand, with the closure of schools in many countries, there was a massive mobilization of digital technology to enable distance learning. So, education became just like the pizza home delivery. Education entered the family space through small or large screens, and not infrequently in pre-programmed, adaptive, personalized learning environments. Even before the health crisis, normality was already disappearing as a dominant reference for our educational thinking, or at least was being overshadowed by something else, the glorification of the unique person. In the current day, personalizing learning environment, it is precisely about the uniqueness of the learner and the need for recognition of one's performances and competences related to a permanent profiling. This, the way, you could say, the digital pervaded education in the pandemic seems to sustain this shift to the personalized learning environment and to strengthen the tendency to put the learner at the center and to outdate the school. So, but at the same time, there was also, and is it now very strongly doubt also about this shift and tendency. It has become clear that families differ in terms of the learning opportunities they provide, that efficient and effective digital learning does not necessarily honor principles of equality. The digital distance learning may allow students to choose where and when to learn, but there was an awareness, you could say, that this freedom of choice gets maybe in the way of another freedom, a freedom of attentive and sustained study. With the demise of school, we have, one could say also to some extent, rediscovered school. We have become aware of how this inclination to make learning digital and personalized is maybe actually deschooling school, and that if so, we lose something that we might be willing to defend and to regenerate, to revitalize, to rejuvenate. We, being not only the adults that decide to organize school, but also the youngsters that were inhabiting them. In fact, what critics of school education never could have imagined to be possible occurred. At least, I don't know, here, maybe it was a little bit different, but in Belgium and more generally also in Europe, it were also youngsters that came to the defense of school education. So youngsters wanted to go to school. This was something which was very surprising for those critiquing the school. And some might say that they just want to see their friends. But our hypothesis is that these youngsters were pointing to something existential about school education, which cannot simply be replaced by digital learning environments and social networks. What they miss, we believe, and I say always we because in a certain sense it's not just I, it's Maarten involved, many people are involved in this kind of thinking. Our hypothesis is that, so they are pointing to something existential about school education which cannot be replaced, and what they miss, we believe, is a particular experience of freedom, of equality, and maybe also of excitement. And I want to refer to the etymology of this word, excitement, the excitement. It comes from the ex and the sire. So the ex, you know, the ex is to take out, but the sire is to call. So the experience to be called out, to be called out. Yes, I will come back again and again to this being called out to the world. Yes, so an experience of freedom, an experience of equality, and an experience of being called out, which is offered by school, of course, when it actually is a school and works as a school, because today you could say very often the school is a de-schooled school, strongly de-schooled school. So these experiences, we also call them emancipatory. And we think that you can say, we claim, that you can defend that the new generation has a right to these experiences. We take school not as an institution or a building, but as a pedagogical form, as a particular form of learning. There are many other forms of learning, which is the learning under the condition of freedom, equality, and formation, or being called out, and this excitement. So I want to clarify what this is about in order to be able to start to address the issue of education in post-digital times. So post-digital meaning that the digital is no question anymore. We can simply not escape it anymore. So it is our condition. So it is, in that sense, we are post-digital. Yes, it's not an issue anymore. Post-digital times, and to address education in these times and to have a certain pedagogical compass. Ines has spoken about the orientation of what we are going to do. So I would like to offer some contribution to that by trying to give voice to the school and its scandal. It's a scandal. The scholastic scandal, which has led to many taming strategies from its invention, is that school enacts the pedagogical assumption that everyone can learn everything. That's a radical assumption. That's the radicality of the school. It's a utopia. It's a utopia which is not at the end of the school. It's not something that the school is going to, but it's the starting point of the school. It's an assumption. And we think, so it means a scandal, because it means that it challenges any recourse to given talents or natural aptitudes, which should lead to proper competences or social positions. It questions any predefined social destination. Social and psychological destination, you could say. We think it is difficult to make school and to be a school teacher, if you don't start from that assumption, even if in fact it can turn out, of course, very differently. Everybody can become capable of everything. And this means that we do not know, so we cannot predefine what a mind and a body is capable of, and that it is also not pre-given what it should learn or has to learn. So school sends the message that our form of life is always also the contingent result of learning and formation, the contingent, so not necessary, the contingent outcome of what is possible. And in our defense of the school, we have tried to describe how school, through its operations of separation, suspension, profanation, attention formation, establishes exactly the time and space to face the challenge to give a form to one's life. And today I would like to give some more indications, limited indications, of how the experiences of freedom, equality, and excitement, of formation by world, you could say, that characterize scholastic learning are actually enacted in school. And I will deal with three things: the going to school, the school talk, and the school atmosphere. So the first thing is the going to school. So that is maybe one of the most important things. The most important is maybe to leave home and the family, a movement and displacement where the child is no longer son or daughter, also not of the nation or of the godly religious family, but becomes a pupil or a student. This movement that you are allowed to go to school, a place where being productive is not what is central, where you don't have to take part in society as a productive part, this place in between, where you are no citizen, no employee, this experience of being able to leave your family, and as we will see, also the social sphere, this place where you are not addressed regarding your background or according your background, also not addressed according to what you later want to become, but where you are drawn into the here and now, into the present, in this class with others, to be allowed to occupy yourself with language, mathematics, sports, geography, without immediate concern for the outcome. That is where you are allowed to study and exercise, to be called out by the world, and this experience is for us a crucial one. And I want to, maybe I can stop.
Oh, you can finish that one.
Yeah. And so maybe, I can clarify the enactment of this in between and this place by considering and how this place is created in a certain sense, by considering a very common expression of teachers, the expression try, and the transformative or performative force or power of this expression. So try. So there are perhaps few other banal phrases that are used so frequently in the classroom. So it is an order, try, yet at the same time an expression of concern. It expresses authority, but also contains an invitation. Try clearly assumes that someone is not yet able to, but it foremost appeals to a becoming able. In fact, there are often reasons to assume that one doesn't have to try. Sociological, psychological, neurological reasons, or how one performed, or how one performed before, or even students themselves saying that this is not for them, nothing what they could do or like to do, as Ines said. School talk is about saying, try, despite all reasons. So it assumes an ability, even creates the experience of being able. So the experience, you could say, of a certain pedagogical freedom. The statement, try, interrupts the chronological timeline where the past defines the future. And that's maybe another characteristic precisely of the school, that it interrupts the defining of the present and the future by the past. It interrupts this timeline. That's the truth. And the student that says, yes, I will try, is drawn into the present moment as a moment of possibility, which is a moment which is neither defined by the past nor the future. So while the invitational part of the expression addresses the ability, the authoritative part is oriented towards the will. The teacher who says try to someone else is in fact willing that the other be willing to try. What makes this willing convincing is the belief in the ability of the student, which the phrase, when truly said in a concrete situation, expresses. What is this willing about? To ask someone to try something implies to ask someone to do an effort, to engage in particular kinds of activities and exercises. But these activities also have a sort of lightness to them because they are part of an attempt. So here we might see how the expression try also has the power not only to transform the time, it becomes the present time, but also to transform the inhabited space. What is created is a kind of safe space, implying also a certain invisibility. I will come back to that. In the sense that there are no specific consequences attached to whether the effort leads to a result or not. The only consequence would be the invitation to try again. And as a student, one inhabits a space where the effort and activities are meaningful in themselves. That is precisely what these terms like practice or exercise refer to. And that is what is at stake in school practice. School practice refers to the typical schoolwork, and Ines has been talking also about it, and I assume that Jorge will also talk about the schoolwork. So, such as reading words aloud, preparing class presentations, learning foreign words, formula by heart, body exercises, making drawings, and so on. So, it requires effort, but the meaning of that work is not defined by the outcome. From the viewpoint of utility, the products and hence also the work are somehow useless. It is just schoolwork. But the value resides on the side of the working student. That is what Foucault says if he speaks about the undefined work of freedom. School practice or exercise always has this indetermination. It is not defined by an input or an output. It is work which is undefined. It is at this point that you could say that the engagement with grammar in schoolwork is crucial. Not only the grammar of language, but also the grammar of the world of nature, or the world of sports, or the world of arts, and so on. So a grammar is not defining, but opening up possibilities. Which is not to say that schoolwork does not have an aim, but you can learn to write, to read, to calculate, but there are no specific aims related to that. You don't have to become an excellent writer or a novel writer or a poet and so on. So that would be a different kind of thing. The schoolwork is about becoming able, giving oneself a shape. So the first is try. The second variation of try is try again. Yes, try again. This, you could say, is a kind of optimism, a kind of belief in the student's abilities, even given one's past. And it also expresses a certain patience. And I think it's a very different, it's not the trial and error that you can find in learning programs like the Bubble or, I forgot the other name, Ines? Okay. Yeah, so which is a very, that's also, you can also try all the time, but that's a very different kind of trying. So try again. So it is giving someone a second chance, a third or a fourth chance. So it means reinforcing precisely the belief that everyone can learn everything, and also, and that I think is important, intervening to protect the student from the influence of psychological and social forces which seek to bind the student to her past and to define the student's abilities by all kinds of diagnosis, tests that have to find out who you are, that have to make clear your preferences and your needs. So they are protected from these activities. So it interrupts also the linear timeline, and it empties the space from all sorts of profiling and diagnosing. So it creates a space-time where someone can become a student and so experience becoming able to do something. School does not address children starting from their familial, economic, social, cultural background, their diagnosed abilities or disabilities. So starting from their profile. School is not starting from their profile and from these differences between students. That would precisely be de-schooling school. That would make their past define their future. But the starting point of school is to address young people at their ability for shaping their lives. And the third variation of try, so try again, also you, and try this. Try this is crucial to see what school learning is about. It points at something outside, something not yet part of someone's life world. Try this so contradicts the idea that school learning is about the person of the student. It ensures that giving shape to oneself through schoolwork always passes through the outside. The instruction orients the student's effort towards specific schoolwork and specific subject matter. So the expression assumes that there is not always a natural inclination towards doing something new, thus necessitating an intervention and serious effort. Specifying what should be tried means defining the effort, the activities, the abilities involved, without actually defining school words. So it remains an invitation to give something a try, while offering and disclosing grammars of world, and by doing that also in an inviting and seducing way, if you want, so to create the experience that we are excited, that we are become spoken to, that we are addressed. So going to school is important. The experience of a certain being freed from the family and from the social. I come back to that. The freedom that the school creates is enacted through all kinds of practices. One of them is the school talk, and school talk, the way we speak in school, yes. And when it is scholastic speaking, then the notion of try indicates something about what this scholastic speaking is about. It is try again, try this. That's what the school is to enact this, let's say, freedom, this equality. Try again, also you, and try this. So this calling you out to the world. This third thing I want to, going to school, the school talk, the third thing is that we should acknowledge that school in itself, when it works as a school, yes, is a particular gathering model. It's a particular association. You could say a social model, huh? But it's a particular way of gathering that, as and I use the words of Rancière, gives air, creates a certain play in the social order, that school, as any emancipation, and I quote Rancière, is a way to create another time in the heart of the normal order of time, a way to inhabit in a different way the common, sensible world, a way of living in the present in another world rather than preparing for the world to come. So we should refrain from relating the emancipatory significance only to a kind of developmental or historical model where emancipation is only reached at the end as a kind of final fulfillment. The fulfillment is already there. And I'm not going into that example, but the hospital school for terminally ill children would perfectly illustrate that the particular gathering that school is meaningful in itself, because the hospital school for terminally ill children has no end at all. There is no outcome that has any significance, but it is still a school and a very meaningful school. So we should not forget this emancipatory, if you want, this working existence of the school, which lies in its displacement of the pedagogical from the family or from the apprentice workshop or from the factory or whatever to scholastic life with its own time, its own rhythm, its own ambience. And I will come back to that because that, I think, is something which is at stake today with the invasion of the digital. I come back to that. It is this displacement, so this emancipation, if you want, that allows for, not for a funny experience, but for a joyful experience. An experience of becoming able. The experience that we are not yet able, but becoming able to write, becoming able to read, to count, to encounter, that we are called out, that to attend, to come near, of the world of language, numbers, nature. So this joy is a joy that is related not to a folding back on yourself, but to a calling you out. That is the excitement, if you want. And a French pedagogue, Georges Snyders, has written a book in 1986 with the title La joie à l'école. I think it is translated also in Spanish, La alegría de la escuela. So, la joie à l'école. So, he's not speaking of the joy of learning. Ce n'est pas la joie d'apprendre, c'est la joie à l'école. Yes? And he emphasizes that school is often approached as having to prepare for the future, for the job one is going to take. Hence, always this phrase, think about your future, later you will need, which is something also what the students internalize and say, now we have to suffer, but it's for later. Yeah? But he says, we have to think the school and the student in the present, which might be a bit of scandalous in view of the urgencies and the challenges for which we have to prepare youth, always implying that we can imagine what is needed. But we have to think about scholastic joy. And the source of this joy is not on the side of play, of pleasant methods, of sympathetic relations between teachers and students, or the side of choice and autonomy. Joys, he says, come from the laborious sorry, encounter with worlds and their beauty through school work. It is not enough that there is pleasure. The joy is the joy of a transformation in life, the joy of an experience of freedom directly related to this being called out. He even writes, and it is very interesting that he writes that, he said, if you have to leave the playground and enter the classroom, you go leave from the playground to the classroom, this is because you cannot experience the highest degree of freedom and joy, which is related to the rupture with the life world, with the being called out, with what he calls the discovery of the refusal of fate. So it is the real freedom, the joyful freedom, is not in the playground. The playground, you could say, is the place where in school you have something left of the social. It's a social place. Yes. The classroom is a mondial place. It's the place where the world, where it is about world. So, and this joy is about, he says, to be engaged in an adventure, which is not just to find out who you are, but where you are, and with whom, and with what, and what this whom and what require and call for, how to take care of them, how to live together with them. I said the scholastic treatise states that school learning is not about the person of the student, so not student-centered. Today, there is a highly present discourse that seems to send precisely the other message, that it is about you, that it is about your person. And digital learning environments are strongly personalized and personalizing. Think about the personal computer, the personal profile, the personal learning paths, the personalized learning analytics, everything about you. Moreover, they are available at will, everywhere, anytime, whereas school, in contrast, is a very particular, separated time-space with a particular collective and bodily gathering of generations, a time-space which is not personalized, not centered around the person, but around a particular disclosure of worlds through school worlds. It is, you know, the phrase of Hannah Arendt, or the translation of Schole of Hannah Arendt. She translates it as, it is time in which we are free for the world. So you could say that in our new condition, you can leave the family, so in our digital condition, post-digital, if you want, you can leave the family, but you risk to become a child laborer in the new learning factory, so not the old industrial factory, but the new learning factory that organizes learning as a production facility of learning outcomes, which has to be efficient and effective, and actually transforms school time into learning time as the time between two measurements of performance. And it approaches the school from the viewpoint of the future. It says it is about an investment, about learning gain, of what you can gain from it, the outcome. You can also leave the family, but you risk to get imprisoned in what you could call the privatized, and Ines has showed how privatized it is already is. This cloud class, the cloud, privatized by all kinds of companies. So imprisoned in the privatized cloud class, where teachers and parents become spectators of the dashboards that monitor the learning process. Imprisoned in these apparatuses where you become a functionary, confronted with acceleration and manipulation to achieve the targets. You risk also to leave the family to increasingly be folded back upon yourself. And I want to refer to the policy paper of Microsoft, which has as title Education for All, where digital technology will help you to learn everywhere, every time, and for those that cannot go to school. And where they say in their vision, the future, in their vision of the future of the world adapts itself to the user and not the way around. So you see what is the philosophy, if you want, behind the Microsoft. It is the world that has to adapt to the user. And so it seems also, so you leave the family, but it seems that the digital apparatus and the social media to which you often immigrate, at least as they function today, largely increase the importance of social recognition, of social comparison, of social positioning, that is this personal profiling, as a source for the experience of a meaningful existence, especially for those who are called the millennials, which are entering our schools. So this seems to imply a longing for visibility, for continuous feedback and permanent connection in order to share everything with everyone, as was once the slogan of Facebook, in order to manage one's personal profile, to add personal performances, preferences, opinions, experiences, in order to show who you are, to show one's personality. So it creates the feeling of being obliged to perform on the virtual scenes, and it seems to feed, on the one hand, an existential anxiety, not freedom, an existential anxiety for not being socially recognized in one's personal characteristics and choices or options, and on the other hand, to generate an increasing boredom, indifference, or despair confronted with the tremendous options that the internet and the profiles of others seems to present. So as such, it risks to deprive youngsters of the possibility of finding what I would like to call a worldly, a mondial, and not a social source of meaningfulness and of experience of freedom and joy, which is not related to personal choice, but to exposure and care for the common world. So I think we have to ask whether the way in which the digital is actually shaping the present of education, and that is maybe not the way it has to do, is not depriving youngsters of the time space of pedagogical freedom and equality, and of the disclosing of a world. So can we already imagine new educational practices with the digital that generate time for the world, in the sense that they are exciting, and so not making you fall back on yourself, as Ines in a way indicated. So digital practices that would interrupt the defining forces of the past, so not the learning analytics, and of the social backgrounds. Can we protect the new generation from the forces of the market? Can we make that these practices embody school talk, that they speak a language that is inviting and seducing and is saying try, and not is saying do this, and if this, then do that. So I would plea, and that is maybe something we can then discuss a little bit for the exercise this afternoon. So that I would say maybe we need indeed a kind of new school movement, you know, the movement that was at the beginning of the last century, the new school movement reacting against the old school. A movement to rejuvenate the school, to give it its force back. And so we have to remember that as far as a modern school was a school, it provided a time and space separated and different from the family, in the beginning very rural society, in the modern society, and from the social, and from the factory. It was an enclosure, enclosing you in a classroom to expose you to another way of thinking and speaking, and to enable you to relate to the outside, So to experience a certain freedom regarding this outside. So school brings them in an inside that allows them to become students and discover worlds in new ways. Now today, as Ines has very clearly demonstrated, all spheres of life are marked by a deep mediatization, which is a stage in the process in which all elements of our social world are intricately related to digital media and their underlying infrastructure. And also marked by a networked individuation where you have to make permanently the synthesis in your profile and so be related to personalized devices and shared platforms. So it makes that all our life is now bound and mediated by the rhythm of the computer, which is an algorithm, and to the rhythm of the learning environments. And that most of the experiences are mediated or mediatized, and the world very often becoming a background, the selfie, just an example. So the right to school is the right for another time and space, a time that interrupts the time of the learning factory and the social medium, another space than the one that is mediated and folds you back upon yourself. So another space also that makes you not into a functionary controlled by dashboards, and in which you in fact are not really learning what you are doing, you are training the machine that learns from you. So if we want school and we want to make it exciting and adventurous, maybe we should indeed make an exit. So maybe, and it has been said, Ines has referred to McLuhan, to the classroom without walls. I could refer also to an architect, I think, I'm not sure, I think he's a Brazilian, I'm not sure. Miguel Brachelli is, I don't know. Miguel Brachelli, and he speaks about the naked school, yes, the naked school. And he states that school must be naked, all their walls demolished to keep their structure, so leaving only what is essential. They would be fully exposed to reality. And I think this is indeed something to think about. Yeah. But the demolishing should maybe rather about the most important wall that shields from reality, the screen and its pre-programmed reality. So, in a way, I would say, and it resonates, I think, with what Ines has said. So, we should go outside for two reasons, in a certain sense. Outside and leave away, yes, the digital, everything that is related to the digital, in order, because this rhythm of the digital and time of the digital is everywhere. So if we want to break it, we have to really leave it out and be confronted with another rhythm, yes? A rhythm which is not centered around us, yes? A good example of the rhythm that is centered around us is the time lapse, yes? You know the time lapse? So we look at the growing of a flower, and we see it in 2 minutes. That is time that is again adapted to us. That is the world adapting to us. If you want to notice how a flower is growing, you need patience. You have to submit yourself to another rhythm, not your rhythm. So you have to submit yourself to another rhythm and to a reality which is not programmed. Not programmed. Nature is not programmed in the way that the digital is programmed and is trying to steer us constantly. So to go out, to be confronted with another written, another time, a not programmed reality, yes? And also, because that I think is also important, to be able to study the digital, yes? It's like the air and water. We only notice it when we don't have it. So if we don't have the digital, then we can start to study it. Then we can start to think about the grammar of the digital. Yes. Then we can make it maybe into school matter, but not just as something that is immediately present. Okay, I think I will stop. I will stop there. I apologize. I have not read half of my paper, but it's a difficult exercise with the translation. But I hope that I could at least give you some idea of what I wanted to say. Yeah.